All right, welcome back. If you're joining us now, we are joined by Miss Sherlett Martinez, the Assistant Ports Commissioner, and she is going to be speaking to us about the new water taxi regulations. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Yes, I am here to share with the public about the new water taxi regulation that was enacted in March of this year. We have started the process in 2015 where we provided a draft to stakeholders. We had a stakeholders consultation, and it took some processes and time for us to get at this point where the law was formulated in March of this year. The water taxi regulation is based mainly to ensure the safety of life when you're on our waterways. It's also to standardize processes when you are applying for a permit on our to operate as a water taxi. It has become increasingly important for us to do that as more and more interest is in the water taxi operations.
Let me step back a bit, because I think it is important to note what the role of the Belize Port Authority is in being able to ensure that any vessel on the sea is adhering to whatever regulations they fall under. So let's just talk about your own mandate as the Port Authority.
Well, our mandate at the Port Authority is to regulate the ports, the harbors, and the waterways in our country as we see it best calculated to serve the public interests. And that means that one of our primary roles is that of ensuring safety of life at sea when passengers, especially we're talking about the water taxi regulation, when they're on a water taxi, what are the obligation of the water taxis operators to the passenger, and likewise the responsibility of the passenger when they're on board the water taxi.
You know, I think clearly there's a difference between the water taxi where people are accessing a service versus someone who goes out on their own private boat to recreate. But there are rules on the waterways that we know that you work to enforce before the changes in these regulations. And those were things like overcrowding and speeding and drinking and even what areas the boats can navigate. How have you been able to keep up with that responsibility?
It has been challenging for the main reason that we require more resources to man these facilities. On record, we have about 12 registered operators countrywide, and if you notice, there are times we don't have anybody at probably San Pedro Belize Express or maybe Ocean Ferry, because we're so, our resources are very limited.
When you say 12 operators, you mean 12 Port Authority boats?
No, when I say 12 operators, I mean 12 water taxi operators,
so, yes.
right?
Yeah.
So this regulation will help us to put more people on more officers at the different terminals. It would also, I know that we will soon get to the fees, but the Port Authority has done its own internal assessment, and we have identified that we need to have other areas opening. And initially when we started, we branched off to Big Creek, and then we opened up Punta Gorda, and then we went to San Pedro, and then to Placencia. Now we've seen the need that we have to branch off to Dangriga, places like Kikaka, and those require resources, right? So that is one reason why, that is one of the reasons, not the primary reason. The primary reason, and I don't want for the traveling community to lose focus, the primary reason is that of safeguarding them while they're on the water taxi and having the water taxi operator being responsible. We have in the regulations where we're enforcing that operators have a safety management and response plan. This is important because when you are faced with a crisis on board, you will know how to deal with that crisis if you plan for it. If you practice your plan, it's not just about having a plan and put it to catch dust. It's actually to exercise your plan when there's a fire on board, when there's a disruptive passenger. How do you deal with these kind of circumstances?
Yeah, that was my other question was going to be, in terms of enforcement of these, regulations or these rules. As you say, the resources are spread thin. Right. So does the Port Authority receive, help or collaboration, for example, from the police department, from the Coast Guard, people like that?
Yes, we do on an annual basis, and we normally request for the other entities to join us in operations, especially around Easter, when it's high traffic on the waterways, around Easter, around Lobster Fest, around Costa Maya. Those are some of the main times when you would see the Port Authority along with other entities joining their resources to a common cause.
Yeah. Now, Sherlett, we've seen some tragedies take place recently with the water taxi, and the first, of course, that comes to mind is the explosion, and then as you pointed out, the issue of disruptive passengers, there was also an incident there as well. My question is, has that been perhaps the catalyst to get the ball rolling on these regulations? Because we've seen, you mentioned that it had been in consultation for a while.
Yes. It has been. We have been in consultation since 2015. It's just the time that the laws takes to become, these proposals takes to become laws. So no, those were not the catalyst for what we are doing. We have identified this need some time ago, but it has become more so important because we have more people interested in providing water taxi services. You see, so we need to have something in place as to how we can regulate that. Yeah. We have more people interested in going to the Keys. I was on the water taxi this weekend, and they had to send 2 vessels at the same time, one directly to San Pedro and one directly to Kikaka. So there is more interest in the sea, and hence the reason why this, at this point, I think is an opportune time for this regulation to have passed.
Now, by nature, we tend to be resistant to change. And the water taxis for a long time have operated exactly as their name, as taxis. You jump on when you want to jump on, you jump off when you want to jump off.
Right.
But these changes are going to significantly change that process. I mean, I can't decide 10 minutes before the boat leaves that I want to go to Kikaka.
Right. Yeah, well, we have put in place the requirement for water taxi operators to submit a manifest. A manifest means that the passengers must give to the operators their name, their date of birth, and we ask for their nationality. The law provides that they provide this to us 15 minutes in advance. We understand our nature of doing things in Belize, and the Port Authority is willing to work along with the public until we can get it, So for this, we have a 1-month period that we're doing this kind of assessment. We're doing this assessment to see how the general public reacts. Eventually, yes, people will have to fall in line, but we're giving this as a test period. And we are quite understanding that there will be hurdles initially, but we will get it. We have a very compliant, we are a very compliant set of people. And we know that once passengers are aware of why we do what we do, it will make it much easier for them.
Well, let's talk about that. Why is this an important step in the safety management of water taxis?
The manifest in particular is important in that you have to provide this information, and if you are on board a water taxi, God forbid something should go wrong, and I have to knock more that doesn't happen. Your name is there. We used to count numbers, but who does those numbers represent? We don't know. We only say 50 people went on the water taxi, right? Now, we can say, okay, there were 50 persons, and these are the names. The regulation makes for the third-party coverage, insurance coverage. So now, if you get injured on a water taxi, or God forbid somebody dies as a result of being on the water taxi, you now have some benefit that you can claim for. how can you claim for benefit when your name is not reflected on the manifest?
You'd have no proof to say
you would have no
boat.
proof that you're on that water taxi. So that is one angle that the traveling community by water should look at it. I would like to urge the public that, try to get a hold of one of the regulation of this particular SI 29 and read it for themselves and see the benefits that are in there for them too as passengers on board these water taxis. The water taxis also, the regulation also asks for the names of the different emergency organization to be printed on board the vessel. For example, the regulations now say that you have to have the name of the Port Authority and its emergency number, the name of the Belize Coast Guard, the emergency number, the capacity of the vessel. It asks for the insurer contact information as well as the operator's contact information. If you're in a water taxi, and we have gotten a lot of calls, but if you are in a water taxi and you see that they're overloading the vessel, you have all right to call the Port Authority, and we will have an officer there to deal with that situation. You can call the Coast Guard if you feel like, there was some risk that warrant
if they're reckless,
exactly, that the Coast Guard goes out. So there is a responsibility on both sides, so the regulation even discusses disabilities and the fact that the water taxis are now to put up symbols for people with disabilities and allocate a section of their vessels.
Preferred seating.
For them as well, Maintenance log. You do a maintenance on your vessel, the Port Authority wants to see it, and it has to be in an approved manner by the Ports Commissioner. So it's a lot of different things in it that we at the Port Authority realizes that has to be placed in law.
Now, these changes were created in consultation with the operators.
Of course.
How was that process of being able to come to agreement on the terms? Were there any particular areas that they had concerns? Because they know the customers. Did they have any areas that they were concerned would be perhaps or would impact their businesses in any way?
Well, it has been since 2015 that we've had that consultation. But I remember one of the issue was the manifest. People think that it might intrude on their privacy, but we're not asking a lot. We're just asking your name, your date of birth, and your nationality. Of course, maybe the fees charged might be a call for concern, but it's just understanding that we cannot perform our duties efficiently and effectively if we do not have the resources to do it with. And we're asking for that $1 in some cases. Some cases it's 25 cents. The most it's $2, where if you're paying $100 or more for your water taxi fare. So it's attached to the value of your fare.
Now, with what I hear from what you're explaining, it sounds very similar to air transportation regulations. For example, if I'm going to go to San Pedro, I do have to check in ahead of time. I do have to submit my name, and so they'll have it on their manifest as well. So although it is local travel, we've seen it done, at least in the air sector.
Exactly.
So there will be some adjustment that people will have to make. But there are also some of the things that I saw, the cargo issue, which some people, if they're the passenger, might be happy that they don't have a bicycle next to them, or, but maybe as the operator might be saying, I have to send a whole other cargo boat now.
Yes. And eventually we will get there. As I said, it's gradual implementation. We're not being just push everything down your throat. But the regulation does address the cargo on board. And we have to also look at the safety of that, because sometimes these cargo can be considered missile. It all depends if you're caught in rough seas. You have things being thrown around, and that can damage and hurt a passenger,
So what the regulations now say, tell me what the changes are.
Well, basically the regulations clearly identify what is considered personal effects. And at the Port Authority, we're saying that the water taxi should carry personal effects and not cargo, right? And so that will be your luggage. It makes for dialysis machine or medical equipment and so on. So
yeah. But anything extra, if I'm not going on the boat, for example, my stuff that I'm trying to send out would be cargo, and that would have to go separate.
well, if it's not personal effect, it's for personal use, then
Okay.
you take it along with you. We're very clear with flammable items like gas range and gas tanks and so on, anything that maybe can cause a combustion. Those things we definitely are not allowing on the water taxis. But as I said, this is a gradual process. We'll be taking it step by step. We'll be working along with the operators as well as the traveling community.
Yeah.
And in these regulations, has anything come up, or maybe through your working with the operators, have they identified issues or problems that they're having that they would like the port to address or to help them with?
For now, in terms of the implementation, well, we were getting a little bit of resistance for the manifest, but as I've said, I've traveled this weekend and I didn't see anybody giving any hard time. My sisters, they heard a few people now and again chit-chatting in the lines, but generally we have been getting some fairly supportive comments.
Yeah.
You know, and the water taxi operators, they put up some of the signs to say, you know, that this is now new and that they need the support of the traveling community. So I believe with time, if we will get it, and we definitely understand the reason why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So.
Now, what type of verification process will be in place? How do you monitor some of these things? Because I want to use the example of one of the things I read was the life jackets. That's always been a rule. And I know when we go on boats, we don't always see or know where the life jackets are. People don't wear them.
Thank you.
So my point is, if the regulations have existed and we haven't seen enforcement, how do we ensure that these regulations that seem very much in favor of keeping people safe, how will these be enforced?
Well, the thing is with the law, prior to this regulation, it said that the life jackets in particular had to be accessible. So that made a difference. And when we tried, if I don't know if you've traveled during the Lobster Fest and Easter, we asked the operators to issue the life jackets. And that was before the regulations, right? Because the law says accessible, and they have their attorneys, oh, accessible doesn't mean you give it to them. So now we're saying in law, you need to, law requires that you issue the life jackets and even go as far as you wear it, you know? So now we have that support in law, where before we had to ask for, you know, try to negotiate, and yes, we need you to do this, it's a safety and concern that we have. Now we can regulate it, and if you don't, then there are charges and penalties that you can face.
And from the Port Authority standpoint, how will your organization ensure that the operators are following through with the regulations, whether it is submitting a manifest but still squeezing people on and overcrowding, or issuing the life jackets but not ensuring people wear it? There's so many little ways when they're out at sea.
I understand, and again, it's about creating more awareness for the passengers to support the regulations. The Port Authority has officers on the ground, right? We have even stepped up our duties in ensuring that every weekend officers are there. First, we used to work Monday to Friday, and that's it. Over the weekend, we get calls, we get videos, overcrowding, standees, and things like that. Now we have officers on the weekends working at the water taxis to ensure that our laws are complied with, you know. So, and of course, we need more officers because in Kikako we don't have anybody. So that's change of passengers embarking, disembarking. There's no monitoring there. Belize City, there's constant monitoring, and then we have some limitation. We have officers in San Pedro, but there's also limitations as well, you know. So, but we're trying, and we definitely try to make sure that that we have people at least in Belize City. We also do from time to time patrols on the waters. We try our best not to delay the vessels or stop them if we don't have to. That's why we use the port of embarkation to do what we need to do. But we can also stop these water taxis if we consider them unsafe.
Yeah.
You know, if you're monitoring how they're traversing on the waters, we can stop them.
And what about the responsibility of the operators? You know, clearly they have to be licensed to operate the boats, but there's also behavior that is expected of them, whether it's how they drive, whether they are fully cognizant, you know, sober, and perhaps, I don't know, had enough sleep if they're like pilots.
Yeah. Well, the process for putting in place or for obtaining a permit, all of those things are taken into consideration. Masters have to be licensed by the Port Authority, and mates will also be will need to get their license by the 31st of December. First, we were only focusing on Rome wasn't built in a day, so we're gradually from strength to strength, and so by December, by 1st of January, these helpers, the deckhands on board the vessel, will also be required to have a license.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this, the implementation of these laws is sort of like an ongoing process. It's not. We're trying to be strategic in our implementation so as not to be burdensome. But we have from now until December 31st for the full rollout of this regulation. These regulations. Some of them are immediate, and some of them take some time. Yeah. And are there, since it's ongoing, as you say, are there any other areas that you might be looking to introduce? You know, maybe further safety measures, other things that you're looking at based on maybe stuff that's happened on water taxis before that's maybe not fully developed yet?
Well, I believe everything is in law, but it's just the implementation period. Let me see. We have by the permit is supposed to all operators traversing our waters are supposed to be compliant by the 16th of September, right? So.
And what does compliance include?
Well, they will have to apply for their permit. They will have to determine the routes that they'll be taking, their schedules, their landing places, and they'll have to have the markings on their vessels, the water taxi, the word water taxi is on both bows on the top of the vessel, the symbol for persons with disability or unlimited mobility. All these different things.
Okay.
The capacity of their vessels, the emergency numbers. There are some with the emergency numbers on their vessels, but not all. So all that's within the law. By then, I'm sure that they will work along. The Port Authority will work along with water taxi operator to become to the standard that we're expecting. But the deadline given by the Ports Commissioner is the 16th. For the permit, right? So thereafter, if you want to operate in this sector, then you will have to apply for a permit, and the permit will also determine how many vessels you'll be using, your captains, a list of your captains, your deckhands, all of these things.
Yeah. So by mid-month, the boats have to be updated. The vessels have to be updated. By the end of the month, mid-September. The mates have to be certified
by the 31st.
By the end of this month. End of the year.
Yes.
I'm sorry. What I'm interested in finding out is when does the rollout of the fee start?
The rollout of the fee starts. The first payment to the Port Authority is expected in October. So all the documentation for September, those has to be, the Port Authority will do the assessment of those or calculations, and by October 5th. So there should be nothing done this month, August, in terms of the fees and that type of thing.
That's important.
Yes, so I get, this is a period for the passengers as well, the traveling community by sea, to get a create more awareness for them. And
So you mean if I get on a water taxi today and they say they have to charge me $1 more, it's not going to the Port Authority?
No, that's not going to the Port Authority. What's going into the Port Authority is from the 1st of September, the month of September, and water operators are to pay that in by the 5th of each month.
Now, this money that will be collected, you said it's from 25 cents to $2, depending on the cost of the ticket that you're
There's one water
purchasing.
taxi that carries a cost of over $100.
I guess that's one of the international boats?
Correct.
Okay. What is this money going to be used for by the Port Authority? Is it earmarked specifically for monitoring?
It is for the creation of new stations within Belize, as I've mentioned, Kikaka, and we have done some assessment in Dangriga, and we know that there's a need there. We know there's a need in Kikaka. So it's to put additional people on the ground to make sure that the laws are being complied with.
Yeah. And we spoke of enforcement, but what are the charges for the operators? Sometimes these fines are kind of a slap on the wrist, so it doesn't matter if I break them or not. Are we also enhancing perhaps whatever punitive measures are in place in the event that they break any of the regulations?
Yeah, there are punitive measures in place if they break the regulations. There are certain sections that there's a direct, like for example, if you overload with passengers, well, it's called carrying passengers in excess. If you carry passengers in excess, that's $50 per passenger, right? It's between $50 to $100, right? Taken to court, and you can be charged up to $100. So that's a fine that's there. Those areas of the law that is not specifically the fine is not specifically identified, then it would be applied to the general law of if you break the regulation, then for a body corporate would be, I think it's 5,000, and for an individual who runs an operator a water taxi, it would be 2,000. I think it's along it's along those lines.
So the regulation does come with some teeth. That's what I'm ensuring.
Yes, you have a particular regulation that says if a person who may be determined by the master or an authorized officer as endangering or likely to endanger the safety of the water taxi or a person on board, can be charged a cost of not exceeding $1,000. Or that person can also be put off the water taxi at a safe harbor.
So that's your disruptive passengers.
Yes. So there are different penalties or what you call it. There are different charges that can be charged for different offenses.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I think I haven't heard as yet, and I just wanted to be clear. When we think of the recent tragedy of the explosion at the water taxi, one of the things that took place, there's the information still isn't completely out there as to what caused the explosion. But we do know people were loaded and the engines were started. I don't know if it's a maintenance issue or if that's the proper protocol. What about issues like that we can ensure people are safe before they, or that the vessel is safe, before people get on board?
I guess that is the reason why the Port Authority is requesting for an approved safety management and emergency response plan, right? The law also makes provision that you must keep your water taxis clean and free from any hazardous material that might eventually create might eventually contribute to what occurred on that fateful day, So yes, we have that considered in the law, the responsibility of the operators.
So there are things like you should check your engine before people get on board?
No, well, we haven't outlined specifically. That should be covered in the safety management plan.
Okay.
Right.
And there's also a backup engine that's required?
Yes, there is. We are asking, the Port Authority has legislated the laws, the regulation specify that there has to be 2 engines when you're operating a water taxi. You don't have to necessarily engage both.
Yeah.
But should your primary engine doesn't want to work, then you have that backup engine.
Yeah.
And that's one of the new things that we have put in place for the regulation.
So no one should be stranded at sea or trying to change boats in the middle of the water.
Well, we're hoping not that doesn't, or we're hoping that they'll have their auxiliary engine to help them to come in. I don't know if they still have their auxiliary and they might want to make a switch at a safe harbor. Maybe they can still do that, but the point is the law makes provision that they should have it and it has to be functional.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, because I was also going to ask that, yes, the regulations seem to mainly address, safety measures, to prevent, tragedies like this. But in the event that something does happen, do they say anything about emergencies on board, or, any required standard of training or responsibilities like that?
Well, we will be conducting some training. That's in the pipeline, where we will have the certificate of competency training from boat masters, grade 1 to grade 3 to 1 being the highest grade. So that those kind of training will be coming online for the mates as well.
All right. Well, we do appreciate you coming in to explain in detail the regulations that are going to be rolled out over the next few months. I can hear you clearly explain just how important it is that we consider safety, even though we don't see as many incidents with water taxis, but it's preventative, and that's the key thing.
Correct.
So we'll have to adjust as customers, but we do have some time to get used to it, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for giving us this forum to explain to our traveling community by sea our regulations. I want to say I want to acknowledge our staff, because they're out there and they're facing the blunt of what's going on. So I want to acknowledge them and thank them. And I also want to ask for the support of the traveling community by sea to support the regulation and support the operators in their endeavor to get the required information.
All right. And as you said, if you see any infraction taking place, you can always call the Port Authority to express your concerns, even if you're on the boat yourself.
Right. Our emergency number is 222-5666.
Okay.
All right. So people can call in, and we have a toll-free 766.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we're going to be getting all the details about the Tech Time for Read book project. Please stay tuned.